Is there any difference in watching church at home via live stream versus physically being in church? We're going to answer that question next. Hi, I'm Pastor Dave, and welcome to another episode of Standing Stones Community Church and our podcast. Each week we get to spend time with the church, and the church is not a building, the church is people. And this week I have another special guest with me. Claudia is here with me this week. Claudia, thanks for joining me.
Wonderful to be here.
It's great to have you with us. Now, just so people get to know you a little bit, could you share a little bit about your spiritual journey?
Well, I was christened as a baby, and I was confirmed at 12. And I belonged to a traditional Episcopal church, and I was married in that church to a same-faith man. And then he was in the Air Force, and so I followed him with his career. And we lived all over the world and lived in foreign countries.
Still going to church in foreign countries and such?
Somewhat.
Okay.
And then after that, we returned home. We retired. And at that time, I was started to look for a new church, go back to my original traditional church, and I found that their ideology had changed.
Is this in Arizona?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is in Arizona.
Okay.
And so I couldn't agree with what they were teaching at that time. So that's when I decided to start searching for a church.
Well, I'm glad you found us.
Well, I am too.
And the husband?
My husband, he is at home, and he will be joining. He joins us off and on at different times.
Okay, well, great. Well, you were just recently baptized.
Yes.
I had the privilege of baptizing you. You recently became a member of the church, so I'm going to make an assumption here, but it seems it's very obvious to you that's important for people to be actually involved in church. Would that be a correct assumption?
Absolutely.
No. Why is that important then?
Well, it's important because the fact is I kind of make it like an example of being on a team, whether it's playing football or volleyball or whatever the team. It's a team sport.
Correct.
And so what I see here is that I've always wanted to participate. You get all five senses. Well, not only that, you get the wins, you get the losses, you get the excitement of everything. I've never been an observer. I want to be a participant. So to me, coming to church and having people around me that are participating, that's what I enjoy.
And we're called biblically to do that. As you're mentioning a team picture, the first thing that comes to my mind is we're all one body. We all have different parts of the body. So in a team, you have the quarterback and the running back, but you also have defense. You need everybody to come together. And in church, God's given us all spiritual gifts.
Yes.
And if we don't come to church physically, how do we share our spiritual gifts? And the spiritual gifts aren't for our own, advancement or for our own edification. It's for the church to be healthy and then to go out and reach the lost. So if I'm not physically in church, if I'm not physically on the team,
There you go.
I can't participate. That's a great example. That's a great illustration.
Yes.
So to come together, now how about fellowship? It's important to have fellowship as well. Because if I'm at home, COVID changed. I mean, if I'm at home, in 2020, that all changed. So with that changing, with the pandemic and so on and so forth, people get used to being at home watching TV, watching live streams, and we still live stream for those who can't make it, but to be in church, to be part of the fellowship, how important to you is to have people you can pray with and the people that you can learn with and ask questions with, just to be part of the body?
Well, that's where the excitement comes from. I think sharing the companionship that you have, people of like minds, ones that we like to be with, and it gives us encouragement. We learn from others, and that part, at home you're by yourself. I know during that time, it was I listened to podcasts.
Now you're on one.
Yeah, that's amazing. Anyway, but Actually, I listened to 5 different pastors. One was in Texas, one was in Virginia, Washington State, and California.
See, that's very common when people talk about being live stream. Well, I can hear the pastors I like to hear, and I understand that, and that's fine. But it's all about me. It doesn't. How does that edify the church? How does that edify the body?
Exactly.
You know, because how do we bring our gifts together if you're listening to pastors in other parts of the country? And I appreciate that. You want to learn and get that knowledge. We have that technology. But it's important to be fellowshipping and bringing that together. The Bible says we should not stop what? Meeting together.
Exactly.
So, and I see that being important to you as well.
Actually, that reminds me of another example, is that when I hear somebody talk about that they're married, and later in the conversation, I find out that the spouse lives in LA or is out of town or something like that. And then consequently, and I said, well, when do you get together? And they said, oh, on special occasions and then on holidays. And I'm thinking, they're missing a physical relationship. They're missing the everyday. And so that to me is like church. If you're not here physically, you're missing a total, complete relationship that you need.
I've never had anybody put together like that, but that makes a lot of sense. So if you're in a relationship, relationships have long distance relationships have a hard time because you're not sharing life. So what you're saying, and that's key to this, if we're not sharing life together, then can we really be the church? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
That's a wonderful analogy. I had not used that before. I'm gonna be stealing that one. You're gonna hear that from the pulpit sometime in the future. But yeah, so we need to be together physically, so that the relationship
can grow.
Right, between us and the Lord and us together.
Exactly.
So we can be the corporate body that God's called us to be.
And you need to be there physically because those everyday problems need to be faced together, and the church can do that for you.
Okay, so how do we? There's been enough research now from 2020 that where people start to live stream and people were forced to watch live streams because we physically couldn't be in church. There's enough research now showing that people got used to that. They got used to staying at home. They got used to going to church that way. I don't think we can sit here and say that's wrong. But is it the best scenario for someone to not physically be in church, to be there? And I think your answer there was perfect with that. But what advice or how can we encourage people who are comfortable just watching live streams? And it may be in Texas and California and Florida, wherever they may be. They can add that, but that should be a supplement. That shouldn't be the majority of the church, correct?
Correct.
So where do you think the danger lies if I allow that to be fulfilling the relationship I have with my fellow brothers and sisters? What's the danger?
Well, I think God made us to not to be alone. And He created the family. He created companionship. And when we isolate ourselves, I think that we get disconnected and we're not completely ourselves. And so consequently, I think it's extremely important, like you said, to be in the church where you have like-minded people that can be there with you and support you. But we need each other.
We do need each other. We do. I know sometimes I have to do hospital visits, and I feel helpless, to tell you the truth, sometimes at the hospital visit, because I'm not a doctor. I can't do anything. But I've had many, many people say, thank you for being there. And all I can do is, all I can do is hold a hand.
I know, but it means a lot.
And just pray. And it's because we're together.
That's the companionship I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it's a feeling, it's something that you know where you belong.
I remember one time there was a family that was in a car accident, and they were up north, and they were helicoptered to the hospital. And when they got there, the family was divided into different rooms because they were all in different, medical conditions. And when I arrived at the hospital, I used the husband's names. They gave me where he was at first. And when I got there, he said, I know you're here. I know it's okay. Go see my wife. Go check on her. It was just having that presence there, just having someone that, okay, we're not alone, So that was a big learning lesson for me, to say, people, we just need each other.
Each other.
Okay, so now the person who is watching live stream and kind of get the habit of it, and I can watch it whenever I want.
Want to.
You know, so I can have my Sunday mornings off, or I can have this. It's very convenient for me. But I realize what you're saying is true. So I need to find a church. Do you think there's any red flags? Now, because you grew up in a church, you went back to your old church, but you said there was some stuff that caught your eye that you said, no, I'm not sure this is where God wants me right now. And I'm not trying to pick on churches. I don't want to pick on church, but are there any red flags that may come up for those who want to get back into church physically that they should be aware of?
Well, when I started my search for looking for a new church, there were TV, of course, always has lots of examples of churches. And then I physically went to churches. And what I didn't want is a pep talk from the pastor or a feel good. He didn't talk about the Bible. He didn't talk about verses by verses.
Oh.
It was your best life now. And or you need to meditate spiritually. You could get yourself to a higher level. Well, those things...
That was being preached in church?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
And so, consequently, that to me, those are red flags.
Okay.
That's not why I go to church. I go to church to listen to God's Word and to hear verse by verse what the Bible has to say, what God has to say. And that's why I appreciate you so much, Pastor Dave, because you teach verse by verse, and your teacher comes out just like a rabbi, because you'll point out that's the name of a town biblically.
Rabbi Dave, I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And then secondly, like east winds. Well, let's go to the Bible to find out what that particular phrase means. So you're using the Bible and the teachings there. It's not your opinion.
Right.
It's what you're talking about is you're teaching the Bible. So when I go home and then I read that particular part in Joel or Daniel, I understand it because I recognize that as a town or a tribe or something like that. I come to learn so that I can understand God's Word more.
You know, years ago, for years I studied Israel, you know, and I just had a heart to go there. And years ago, I had someone who had cancer, and it was a Wednesday night in probably October, and he looked at me and he said, Pastor Dave, when are you taking me to Israel?
Oh my.
Yeah, and I knew that we both knew the physical condition he was in, and so by a month later, within 30 days, him, his wife, myself, and my wife were in Israel. And that started my Israel tours, you know, because once that happened, that was in 2005, 2004. And from 2005 on, I started taking tours to Israel. I started taking people to Israel. I've been doing that ever since then, except when Israel was not allowing visitors to come in. And what you just said is the reason why. Because I even took my kids over there, because you walk the land and you see the land and you see the sights and you're reading the scriptures. And then when you come home and you have I know where Caesarea is. I know what the Sea of Galilee looks like. I know what, it becomes real. And you know, to me, preaching expository is the only way I can preach. I don't look forward to Christmas and Easter and Mother's Day, important days of the year, because they're more topical. You know, so I have to use a verse and do as expository. I like to be in a book, chapter by chapter, week by week with that. You know,
that's what I like. Yeah. That's why I'm here.
And a Bible teaching church is what you need to be in. So, now you've been here for a while, and we've got to know each other somewhat. But I don't remember, how did you find our church?
Actually, it was online.
Okay.
It happened to be Pastor Brandon Holthouse out of California.
Yeah.
And he was interviewing you, and he said, this is a good pastor. He's a Bible teaching, and recommend him if you're in the Phoenix area.
Okay.
And so I was so excited because I had been searching off and on, going to different churches, but never felt just exactly the right place yet.
All right.
So
Brandon, I owe you another one. How's that? You know, so I took some folks over to his church last July.
Oh.
We took some over because they have that where they also have something on their website where they a locator, church locator they call it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're listed on that.
Right. So I went over there. I wanted to encourage them because they were like, do people use this? I go, look, I'm telling you, people use this
They
because we
do.
have people come to our
That's
church.
actually that's another thing I did check.
Yeah.
Was their location?
Yeah.
Yes,
So
locator.
a like-minded church. And again, watching online. Well, you watched Brandon, so you had to do that online because he's in California.
That's right.
So one of the keys to me is how do you evangelize? If we're watching online, you don't really invite people into your house to watch a live stream. You're going to watch it when it's convenient for you. But how do we reach the lost? How do we welcome people to church? If we're not here physically, how do we help evangelize? How do we bring guests and visitors into church? To me, that's a huge red flag because it's a hindrance. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you invited people to our church?
Actually, I've invited a cousin. I'm still waiting for her answer.
Okay.
And so, and my husband's come several times.
Just the first name. What's your cousin's first name?
Melanie.
Melanie, if you're watching this, we're waiting We're waiting to have you enjoy church with us. How's that?
That's good.
I'll help you with that.
Oh, thank you. That's an encouragement.
It's enjoyable to meet the people in the church. It's enjoyable to have these conversations. I know sometimes it's kind of hard to have a conversation about stuff that's knowing people are watching. But just from your own heart, what's the most important thing that someone needs to consider when it says, do I go back to church? Sunday's my only day off, or the kids have activities, or my husband doesn't want to go, or my kids don't want to go, whatever it may be. Is there something that you could share from your own heart saying, this is why it's worth making the effort being here? This is a non-negotiable.
For me, it's like completion. Mm-hmm. Just like being baptized. I wanted to be part of the team. Well, to me, I want to have the fullest possibility of the experience. And to me, then I put this as a top priority for myself. It's something simple that I can do and put God first, basically.
Okay, putting God first. And again, this is a general speculation, so I'm not trying to be negative. But when people have to make a choice on what church to go to, I'm making an assumption here. Is it comfortable? How long does this pastor speak? Is he funny? Is he this? Is it felt needs? They have this in their mind. I think they have this criteria, what they're looking for in a church. You talked about a Bible teaching church. You talked about expository preaching. And again, we haven't talked about this before, but if I'm going to do a checklist, what's the most important thing? What's the 2-3 things I need to look for? Distance, teaching, belief. What is it that I need to find in a church? If I'm at home and I want to physically get in church, what's important? It's a personal response.
It's a personal response. To me, it would be, I guess I go back to the rabbi part.
Okay.
The teaching is so important to me.
But also the statement of faith, because the other one you said, so how they believe it as well.
Exactly.
All right, so if you're looking for something, Bible teaching, statement of faith, what they believe. I always challenge people, what do you believe and why do you believe it? You have to know that too. So, okay, I interrupted you. Anything else?
No.
How about distance? What about drifting too far?
Actually, distance it's convenient, but when I started looking for a church, that was probably on the low priority, to be honest with you. I was raised in a big cathedral, and obviously that's not important to me because I think the church is people.
Okay.
And to me, the teaching and the ideology and the doctrine is actually, I left a church because of their doctrine that I didn't agree with when they started preaching that kind of thing.
Well, how do people know that? If they're watching it online and you were saying it's important to be physically in church, how do they find out about the doctrine, or What questions do they ask about the doctor?
You have to go to the church and actually have an interrelationship with the people and start talking and get to know the pastor. Then you find more of the doctrine of that particular church, because just reading it online, what their statements are, mission statements, there's a lot of wavering room
So
there.
I can't pick up doctrine on an online streaming service, do you think?
I don't think so.
Okay. That's interesting.
They make a statement, but they all make it generic.
Okay.
That's the other thing that I found looking at different churches. I would go to their mission statements, and I would see these.
The statement of faith. You
Yeah,
mean?
statement of faith.
Okay.
That's all right.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, well, that sounds pretty good. Then I would listen to a sermon, and I'd say, well, let's try that one. So
Okay.
then I actually would go to the church, and then then the atmosphere in the church makes a difference. I'll share something very personal.
Okay.
My parents, when they passed, I inherited a house. And at that time, the market in Phoenix had just dropped completely. So I became a landlady against my total wishes. Anyway, I had 3 different occupants in that house. And the first occupants, I had revised everything and thinking that if you had a nice house and you gave it to them, that they would take care of things. They did not. So anyway, and then the second couple and their children came in, promised me all kinds of good things, and I found out the same thing. So on the third go around, I decided that I was going to do the interview, and I did. And I found a lovely family. But the one stipulation I did have is that I needed to come in every 6 months and actually physically observe what the house looked like. All right, just because of bad experiences in the past. They agreed to that. So the first time that 6 months went in, and I'm walking around in this house that my parents had lived in, and I said, there's something different here. And they said, and I'm saying, it feels different. And Bill said to me, he pointed over to the counter there, and there was a stand, and there was a Bible sitting there. And he said, it feels different because God lives here. And all of us, I got holy goosebumps. Yep. What happened is because that feeling when my mom and dad lived there was that feeling. It was a home and it was full of the Lord. And when these other occupants had taken that house, it wasn't a home. But when Bill and Rosemary moved into it, it was totally different. And that's, I guess, my comparison is to churches. When I go into the church, I was looking maybe for that, not feel good, but just
A home.
the home.
Yeah.
And this is what I felt when I found you, Standing Stones. It's home.
That's a wonderful illustration. You're giving some wonderful illustrations today with that.
Well, I was a teacher.
I think people looking for a church, one of the things is distance, which you said is not a big deal.
No.
The other thing is, how big is the church? I want a big church so I can just kind of go in and... Now, we have a smaller church.
That's right.
You know, so, and I tend to enjoy the smaller church. We get to know people, we get to do things, but do you think when I want to find a church, I should go to the biggest church around me, or does it matter what?
No, I don't think it matters the size, but I would say with my explanation, I would be looking for the Lord there if He's there in the house.
So no matter what the size of the church is, the Bible teaching, it's the statement of faith, it's the family feeling for it.
Exactly. And you can feel it.
Right. And our thing is this is a place where strangers become friends and friends become family, which really does happen.
It does happen
It does
in
happen.
that kind of atmosphere. And it's friendly, and it's not just friendship. It's that special sincerity, warmth that you have. And you can feel the difference.
Right. Well, Claudia, it's been wonderful having this conversation with you. Again, you gave some great illustrations, and if you're looking for a church, I hope you're able to understand what Claudia's saying, and because she was there, and you walked away from one church for
Oh,
that. And
yes.
I'm not asking anybody to walk away from a church,
No.
but I am asking you to be physically into church. The question was, does it make a difference? And I believe it does. So again, we could go on and on about this, but do you have any final words or any kind of final words of encouragement for anybody who might be at home thinking, yeah, you know what, I can live stream what I want, but I do need to physically be involved with the body?
I think people need companionship, and I think God made us that way. And I feel very strongly that it's important that we be together to build those relationships. And the smartphones and the computers do not do that. So
They isolate us.
They do. And there's an empty hole in a person when they're not able to share daily experiences and have that warm feeling. So my advice is to find a church
Okay.
and to find people.
Like-minded people.
Yes, like-minded people.
And I agree. And there's nothing wrong with watching online for some services, some great teaching. People will say, well, I can get fed by just being online. And we can get fed, but we have to be involved as well. So if we're not, it's knowledge and wisdom, I call it. Knowledge is getting the information, but wisdom is applying it. And if we're not involved in church, we're really not applying the wisdom that we have. And we may learn the scriptures. And there's some wonderful, amazing teachers out there. You mentioned, Brandon in California and so on and so forth. There's wonderful guys out there teaching it online. But if I'm not applying it and actually doing it, then I'm not really using the knowledge God's given me, right?
That's true.
Well, that's a great way to kind of bring this to a close. So again, let me thank you for watching this podcast. Thank you, Claudia, for joining us once again.
Good to be
and let me
here.
invite you to Standing Stones Community Church. We're located in North Phoenix, 19th and Pinnacle Peak. Every Sunday morning at 10:30 is our service time. And we have like-minded people here who love the Lord, who want Bible teaching. We do preach expository preaching, book by book. I'm actually right now in the Minor Prophet, the book of Joel.
That's right.
So I'll be in Joel for a few more weeks. So I'd love to have you with us. So 10:30s on Sundays, Standing Stones Community Church. Look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you.
Thank you for joining our Standing Stones podcast today. It is our hope that through this podcast, your faith is increased, your spirit is encouraged, and your knowledge of the Word of God is expanded. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share this podcast with your family and friends, and we look forward to you joining us this Sunday at Standing Stones Community Church. For more information about our church, please visit standingstonescc.org.